Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of Builder Beyond Barriers. Today, I'm joined by Mark Niven, who is a solicitor, so he's into the law side of things, and he's based at Stockport, isn't it, Mark?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So Stockport is a place that I never heard of until I had a client there and started travelling there on a regular basis.
Lots of development going on in Stockport these days.
There is, and I think did I hear a figure of like £100 million has been spent there or more? It was a lot of money. So it's all happening. And for people that don't know, Stockport is basically Manchester. It's that's where it is.
Very close.
Yeah, so one stop away. So Mark, can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Yes, so as you say, I'm a solicitor, qualified in 2005 into Evershed's real estate investment team, and from the outset, working for some very big clients and on some very big transactions, but at the same time started to develop my own client base. Some of the relatively smaller clients, I would sort of take a bit of ownership, and that's what I really enjoyed doing, getting to know my clients and sort of being a bit more proactive rather than just waiting for work to come through to me. And obviously over the years since then, I've built up a client base. I've been very lucky to have some very good clients, and sort of moved around a bit, a few different firms of varying sizes. These days, I work on a consultancy basis for a couple of firms, but also over the years, I've become more closely involved with a number of businesses. So I started out life doing investment work, but over the years, I've done pretty much everything when it comes to commercial property, but also increasingly general commercial and corporate work in the sense of buying and selling businesses and shares in companies. From a development perspective, I've always enjoyed development work. I think a lot of property lawyers do because it's quite challenging. So it's quite it's really interesting to get your teeth into, and especially I think one of our roles as solicitors is doing a lot of detective work and visiting sites, having a close look. What can we see? Can we see evidence of any rights or interests? Can we see anything that might be a problem? The same when we look at all the documents and title information and so on and so forth. And then a lot of it is experience that developers have experience, and we as lawyers also have experience of the kinds of issues that can crop up. But also through experience, we know what the solution is that's likely to be acceptable to a buyer or to a well-advised tenant or funder. So very excited to be involved with this podcast. Hopefully can get to meet some interesting people and share a bit of knowledge.
Absolutely. I think, I've worked with lots and lots of different solicitors, and I've got to say, I haven't generally got a high opinion of solicitors. I'll tell you why, just to put some meat on the bone on that one. Often it's been residential transactions. And we've done our normal things, developer, and we've sent the contract out. And we've made sure that the client is really clear that they have 5 weeks to exchange. In the days when you could get searches done in 5 weeks, by the way, just to clarify that, and it was so often, despite the fact that their client had said, "Look, this is the time frame," they just ignored it. You literally got to 5 weeks and hadn't even looked at the contract, and it wasn't just a one-off. It was often the case. And I think the other thing that has happened in my time working with solicitors, and remember, being a developer, I had one solicitor that worked for us who was amazing. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but he was a guy called Robert Knight. He's an absolutely amazing guy. In fact, he did a lot of work for NCP car parks.
Right,
the two brothers, and he bought their boat for them. and I think as a gift, they the time, I think, might be wrong. It was the largest privately owned yacht. And as a gift, he got a week on it, and I think the fuel tank held like 100 grand's worth of fuel, so it was like, ridiculous.
It's a good gift.
Yeah, good gift. Yeah, so he worked for us, but we also had people on the kind of the commercial side when we bought sites, and sisters said, no, it's worth this, and they started putting their aura in about roundabout values, and that wasn't their remit really. So we had a couple of deals go south because of that, particularly when we kind of held the ransom strips. So they came on board sooner or later, but it just took longer because we just went, well, that doesn't work, and walked away. So unfortunately, that's kind of been my take. But when you find a good solicitor, hang on to them. Don't let them go.
Absolutely.
And keep them with you, because it's so important. And I think that's also so important kind of, in the contracting world. Do you deal with construction contracts as well as kind of land and investments?
Yeah, because I think over the years, as you become more closely involved with clients, you kind of get to the point where you can't really be saying to a client, especially a relatively smaller developer, oh well, I need to bring in this specialist, that specialist, the other specialist, and here are all their additional fees. You want to know, you're interested, so you get to know about all aspects of the development process, including construction contracts and the warranties and the different methods of procurement in construction, so on and so forth. So you could do as much of that as possible yourself for your client, because I think my view as a solicitor is that you almost want to be a sort of in-house advisor rather than somebody at a separate business that sort of you pick the phone up to occasionally, doesn't really keep you up to date with what's going on, and doesn't frankly take an interest other than in getting a fee at the end of the deal. And in terms of what you're saying about solicitors, don't forget, for me as a solicitor, I have to deal with all sorts of solicitors as well, and I fully understand what you're saying. It can be very frustrating dealing with some solicitors, especially where, as you say, they go beyond the remit, and sometimes you have to say to the solicitor, is this your client's instruction or is this your own point that you're making? But I agree with you. If I come across a solicitor that I think is good and that I work well with, I will keep hold of their details, because it's quite often you have a situation where you need somebody on the other side of a deal, and you say to your client, well, look, I've worked with this solicitor in the past, let's use them. So I think something solicitors don't do often enough is collaborate with one another. But I think for me, especially having been involved more closely with a few companies kind of on the inside, I think the key is you just want to make things as straightforward as possible, whilst obviously you've got to protect your position, your client's position, but at the end of the day, the process needs to be as painless as possible, and also, costs need to be kept down. That's absolutely key. And I'm always surprised. I mean, it's one of the benefits of being a sort of fleet of foot consultant is that I can be quite competitive on pricing, and it does surprise me when I find out what some firms charge for. Because often when I'm involved with a transaction, it may be myself on my own or with a paralegal, and then on the other side I might be dealing with 3 or 4 different people within one firm. You may even have more than one firm. Often for whatever reason, the property element of a transaction, if it's a corporate deal, they get another firm involved. So keep things simple is the key, I think.
Okay, Mark, just note to editor, just cut this bit out. Just need to drop your camera down a bit because we're getting your nose. And
That's
people
strange.
people like to see your mouth moving.
Because I can see myself quite nicely, but
okay, in the frame, I think because you've come in portrait mode, so it changes it. So
does that improve?
No, it just puts you on your side. It hasn't changed your
All
rank.
right.
So just try and keep correcting it. Just keep it a bit lower than you think.
What's that?
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. Because and then we'll just carry on. But that's great. Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I think people don't understand. I think in our industry that you need a really good professional team around you, and it's so important to have a professional team because we can read a contract, and I can read a contract, and I get the gist of it. But there are certain phrases, a bit like we have in construction. So and I'm being really simplistic here, but DPC, DPM, we understand what those things are. RSJ, we're builders, we understand that, and some people outside the industry understand it as well. But with legals, there's endeavours, best endeavours. We read them, and they don't mean a lot to us. We kind of understand the gist of it, but as I'm hoping you can explain in a second, Mark, there's a big difference between all endeavours and best endeavours, and isn't there?
There is, and it's one of those things that you may, as a sort of layperson, when it comes to legal matters, you might not think a lot of it, but if we best endeavours is a no really. We never want to agree to best endeavours on our side because it means that you would literally go to any lengths to achieve that obligation, including spending any amount of money and even acting against your own commercial best interests. So what we want is reasonable endeavours. There is another one in between. There is also a concept of all reasonable endeavours, and there's some debate as to what that means. What does it mean? Is it equivalent to best endeavours, or is it somewhere in between best endeavours and reasonable endeavours? Well, generally speaking, if you're the party that's got the obligation, reasonable endeavours is what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you explain, therefore, in a contract, how that could really catch you out then? So if you've got a contract to buy a bit of land or to build a property by a certain date, and it's best endeavours, what does it mean?
Well, I mean, I suppose if, for example, you had a long stop date, you had to achieve a particular step by a long stop date, maybe it would be obtaining the consent of a third party. They might have a covenant or an easement that affects the land. If you agree if you agree to best endeavours, then really, if that third party wants to exploit the sort of ransom situation, you've got to pay what you've got to pay. So whatever they demand, that's what you've got to pay. So it could be very costly indeed. And as I say, it could go against the commercial interests of the party with the obligation.
Yeah, I totally understand that. So another thing that comes up, and this really, it kind of annoys me a little bit. I think we had a chat about this earlier, and you said that there might be some other case law come out that kind of affects this as well. But some people that recently came onto my property workshop, so it's called contractors into developers. So contractors that want to become developers want to understand about the property side of it. The two of the guys have been on quite an expensive 3-day course to kind of explain how to do development. And at no stage did anyone explain Stokes versus Cambridge. So to me, that is where, absolutely where we make money. That if you get that situation and you buy a site and it's got extra sites coming off it, if you're not aware of the ransom strip legislation, the bit of case law that really kind of puts that into its into the right light, you just don't understand anything about development. That's what development's all about, and they had never been taught that on a 3-day course.
But also, I mean, I agree, and also just the very fact that you need to identify if there may be ransom issues. I mean, I think one issue that often comes up with developments is visibility displays. So you may have all the land that you feel that you need for the development, but actually, do you have the the space that you need to put visibility displays in place, that can catch people out. But also, what is highway land and what is privately owned? We always, as solicitors, undertake highway authority searches. But you really need to make sure if there are verges or pieces of land that adjoin the public highway, are they part of the extent of the adopted public highway or not? Things like that, ransom strips can arise. And then, as you say, if you have a ransom scenario, then the case law, Stokes versus Cambridge, can come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say, it's a very good point about the kind of the vision lines that for the highways, and people obviously often don't know that. But also, there is so much land that is not on the digital system. So you might have a ransom strip, but not know who owns it or if anyone owns it. But they might appear with a bit of paper at some stage and go, oh, actually, look, I can prove I own that, and it's not in the digital system. So you can't do a search on it, you can't find that owner, and that kind of happens, and that's when insurance comes in place, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, insurance is a very useful tool. I think it's one of those. I think people sometimes are a little bit, they oversimplify the scenario. If you don't give all the facts accurately to the insurer, then the product that you end up with is not going to be fit for purpose. And this is why I always use brokers. And a lot of solicitors sort of buy off the shelf policies. There are, the big insurers have websites where you can go on and order a policy and say, oh, there's a restrictive covenant. But I like to work with brokers so I can discuss get into the finer detail, because an insurance policy that doesn't cover the risk accurately is of no benefit. It may allow you to get the deal done, the funder's happy and so on, but further down the line, if you ever actually have to rely upon that policy, then you may have a problem.
Yeah, no, I again, I get that, and we've taken out a few policies in our time, and the solicitor we worked with was advised us when the right time to do that was and when it wasn't, and I think a good solicitor will explain the risk to you in layman's terms,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can decide whether you're going to take that risk on or not, or you're going to cover it, or and I think that's quite important that you have that discussion.
And also,
Um,
crucially, that if there is let's say there's a restrictive covenant that causes concern, you've got to be very careful what you do in relation to that covenant. If you start speaking to people that you think may have the benefit of it, or digging around in the wrong way, then the insurers might say to you, well, it's invalidated. They may say, we're not going to cover you in the first place, or if there is an existing policy, you may well invalidate it. So sometimes I think it's what I tend to advise clients quite early on. Well, look, if this is something we think we may need to insure, let's be very careful what we do up to that point, because once you open the can of worms, you can't close it again. So if you want a deal to be done and transaction to progress, often it's better to put the sort of indemnity insurance cap on things and then move on.
yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think it's not as expensive as people think sometimes. And we've insured things just in case in
Mm-hmm.
the past, and it's been a couple of grand, and really it's a couple of grand well spent, because it also causes less problems when you have things like people taking mortgages out and other things that could flag up
Exactly.
problems in the future. So that's quite important. So the other thing you said you get involved with is buying and selling businesses and that kind of side of it,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because one of the things that I've come across quite a few times is kind of share agreements. And I think people really get that so wrong. So, someone's working hard for the company, or at the stage, people get very excited about an individual who's in the company and they think they can't survive without them. Often, actually, I'll be honest, they're wrong. But there are a few people that really shine through sometimes. And so they decide to give them shares in the business, which is what they do. They don't have a share agreement. They don't know how to exit the situation. And then, as has happened with a few of my clients, a year later, you've realized that guy actually isn't good for the business and you want to get rid of him. And he's got an idea that his shares are worth so much more than they are. And you can't get rid of him, and he's got voting shares. What would you advise people in that situation? Because, the advice obviously would be to get a share agreement done in the first place. But how do you handle kind of giving equity of any type to employees because you feel they're an important part of the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point, because you come across that quite frequently, especially where businesses are looking to exit, and you've got these sort of legacy, minor shareholders that are sort of still in the picture but not involved with the business. So I think share options are a good way to go. So you can give somebody an option to acquire shares, and effectively they don't have any shares, but if there's a big event, an exit or a partial exit or a big investment, then provided they're still involved with the business, or if they've left on good terms, then they can potentially participate in that exit and get some of the proceeds. So I would say that's the best way to go, really, having an option agreement. You can put schemes in place, option schemes in place, employee share schemes that benefit from tax reliefs. So that's quite a specialist area, and you need to go to specialist employment lawyers. But if people are happy to have authorised schemes that don't comply with that tax, with those tax rules,
Benefits.
then
Yeah.
it's something that can be put in place relatively straightforwardly. And I think it's the danger, if there are, as you say. I mean, I was talking to a client the other day, and they've got a situation where there's nothing really in writing. It's all been discussed. This individual will have a certain shareholding in the business, and they'll do this and they'll do that, but there's nothing in writing. So then it's a case of, my advice to them is just be careful how you go back to this individual. That we don't really want to be giving credence to rights that might not actually exist. So it's a messy situation if you end up with people who have these sort of legacy shareholdings, and it can cause issues on an exit or a major investment. So I would say the best thing to do is to go down the share option route, so that somebody can have that option will be null and void if they leave the business, and you can specify whether it might be that they can retain them in certain circumstances if they're a good leaver.
Okay, and what about you've got A and B shares, haven't you? So you've got shares that are non-voting shares. Is that another option, or is that
You
not
can
really?
certainly do that. You can have different classes of shares. So you could have, as you say, voting, non-voting. You could have certain shares that can participate in dividends, so the distribution of profits, or it might be that some shares can have a larger share of profits than others. So that you can do it. You could go down that route of different share classes, but then potentially you've still got a situation where somebody is it hasn't worked out in terms of the relationship. You may still have them there as a sort of legacy shareholder. So there's different ways of doing it. There's certainly different ways of doing it.
Okay. So yeah, it is a recurring problem I find
No,
with
I
my
agree
clients,
with you.
because they tend to get a bit over generous,
Especially
and they
early
tend,
on, because I think the
yeah.
danger is they think to themselves, well, I don't have a valuable business at the moment, but of course down the line, when they do have a successful, valuable business, it's the calculations are different.
Oh yeah, and also, someone working in a business turning over 500,000 might be quite key, but someone working in the same business when it's doing 4 or 5 million might be a complete waste of space, really, and unable to do it. So
Hmm.
that's quite important, so I see it, and I found that. I had people that were really good in the small business, but they didn't grow with the business. They couldn't get their heads around it. They didn't understand change. I've always blamed myself a bit like for that because I didn't sell it to them in the right way and bring them through the change. I've learned a lot from that, but they didn't grow the business. Didn't understand us as a bigger business and the new people coming in, all the changes. So that makes a big change as well.
Absolutely. Well, this is it. You can't predict how things are going to progress um, in the future. But actually, that's the role of a lawyer, really, is to sort of to be a sort of a bit of a doom monger
Yeah.
and to say, well, look, we've got to sort of advise you about what could go wrong in the future, and frankly, what we see is going wrong quite frequently, as you say. Um, with experience, you have people coming to you when things have gone awry. You sort of get to know what the risks are.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and I must say, uh, I sometimes see planning consultants the same. Really, they kind of go, well, it's a bit like that car mechanic. I don't think you're gonna. I don't think that's a good idea. But yeah, it's important. But it's important to get someone on your team. And professional teams, as I've said before, you know, they're so important, and you need someone on your side. You need someone to advise you. You need to kind of
Hmm.
take that advice, and you don't want to rush into things, and people do. I think Richard Branson famously writes his contracts on the back of a bit of paper and gets them signed almost immediately, so they can't get out of there. So it isn't. So normally in an aeroplane in first class after a few glasses of champagne,
I'll have to
which is
try
most
that.
yeah mostly works for him. But yeah, so in you looking for a client, what kind of clients are you looking for? So what is a good client for you? And kind of when they come to you with a deal or a project for you, what kind of makes you think, yeah, they know what they're on. This is going to be a pleasure to work with them because it's a two-way street, isn't it? I mean, working with anybody.
It is. I think it, it, a client that's happy for me to become closely involved with the project. I mean, that sounds a bit strange, but I think sometimes both the lawyer and the client are quite happy to have a sort of a very distant relationship, whereas the lawyer, you just reactive and you deal with the solicitor on the other side, but you don't really, you're not really aware of the context. I like to get involved because, first of all, I find it interesting, and that's why I do the work that I do. But also, I think you can't. It's very difficult to do your job properly unless you are. Uh, I want to be copied into all the email correspondence. I want to see the site, as I say. I want to know what's going on because really, I think it's my role to jump in when I see that I need to jump in, rather than for my client to think, oh, well, maybe I need legal advice on this point. It's our role, really, to be um, closely enough involved that we can see the opportunity for us to sort of jump in and to use the cliche, add value to the relationship. So I think client that's happy for me to be involved, get my hands dirty, but also a client that's willing to take advice. Um, so I, I think I do come across clients sometimes who, I'm not saying that clients have to agree with my advice, but I like clients to be receptive and open to getting that advice, because otherwise I always think, what's the point in taking and paying for legal advice if you're not going to take that advice on board? And I think also, just in terms of flexibility, I'm quite flexible in terms of I'm always fairly accessible to clients. Um, and I think it's great if you can get the same thing. If a client can be reasonably responsive, and I think, again, as you say, it's very much a two-way street. And it doesn't work for all businesses. There are some very large property businesses who like to use a very big law firm, and they've got a huge menu of fixed fees for doing all sorts of different things, and they're working with dozens of kind of faceless junior lawyers. That's not how I operate. I think I often tend to work with more owner-managed businesses. I know that, again, that can cover a whole range in terms of size of the business and so on. But really, for me as well, it's about developing an ongoing working relationship. It's in nobody's interests to do one transaction together and then we go our separate ways. It's like you said, you had a lawyer that you used for many years. Really, that's the relationship that I want to develop with my clients, if I can.
Yeah, and like I said, we used Robert Knight for years and years and years, and in fact, he was so difficult to replace because he's a one-man band. He was on the end of the phone. He piped up and gave us advice in loads of different scenarios. We weren't worried about minute by minute billing and all that kind of stuff. It
Yeah.
didn't happen, and he was a member of the team.
Yeah.
And he told some very good stories as well. So he definitely been a few places, done a few things. So he was a great member of the team, and I think that's what you need with a professional team. You need someone who's going to give you really frank advice in a language you understand. And I find that not just with solicitors, but I find that with accountants, for instance. I remember one of my accountants, one of the kind of guys that was allocated our company, coming down, and he'd gone into his spout of this and that and the other, and we're about 15 minutes in, and I just went, "Can you just stop for a second?" He went, "What?" I said, "Can you just repeat all that in English? I haven't got a clue what you're talking about." He wasn't speaking to me in a way that I understood, and it's really important that I understand something, and I'm not scared of asking again and again and again if I don't understand it. And I think some people are. We hold certain people in very high regard, and I think solicitors is one of them. I think accountants, I think doctors, because they're seen as professionals and they're seen as being above, being dodgy. And I think it's really important that you go, no, I need to understand that. And I've had a lot of benefit from actually stopping and just going, hold on, I'm not understanding this. And I love it when a client does it to me. So when a client says, "I didn't understand that,"
Oh, definitely.
It means that they want to understand it. It's really.
And it's about, I think as well, it's about honesty and transparency. If I don't know the answer to a question, I've got no qualms about saying to a client, "Well, look, I don't actually know what the answer to that is. I can go away and look into it. I can research it, or I can advise you about a specialist who can get involved, a rights to light specialist or whatever who can get involved." But I think that's maybe earlier on in your career, you're a bit more prone to trying to kind of bluff your way through things. You don't want to admit that you don't know. But now, I think for me, it's about complete openness and honesty. I think you learn with experience, don't you, that you're far better off taking that approach. And actually, people that you're dealing with, whoever it is, clients or other professionals, appreciate that honesty.
They do, and I find, and I can't say this enough. I suppose I'm kind of repeating myself, but just saying to people, "I don't understand that. Please repeat it," and say it again and again. I think when you're younger, to say that, you kind of think, "Oh, he's going to think I'm an idiot. He's going to think I don't understand." That I know I'm not the brightest person in the world, but I'm not stupid. Okay, so if I don't understand something, it's so paid dividends. I mean, I remember, I can tell loads of stories around it, but I mean, one situation where I was speaking to an electronics expert about a Lutron system in the house, which is a control system, and it just wasn't working properly. And I went through it, and he was telling me, and he was using all these big words, and and I kept on asking again. I said, "I don't understand," going again. And in the end, I sussed it. I sussed that he had put too many lights on each of the rings, and that's why it wasn't working. And when I said, "You've put too many lights on the rings in, haven't you?" He went, "Oh yeah." But just because I just was willing to look stupid and keep asking the same question.
Yeah.
So
And I think that works both ways as well,
yeah.
Robin, in the sense that, a bit like if you're a teacher, you've always got to check for understanding. There's no point in parroting away if the student hasn't understood what you've said. I think you've got to do the same thing as a professional, just because something might be obvious to you as a professional, but you might not be obvious to the person that you're talking to. So I think you've got to kind of give the client that opportunity as well to say, could you just clarify that? But yeah.
And I think often with builders, it's a big thing with builders. The amount of builders that told me I'm stupid. I know how to build something, but I'm stupid. No, you know how to build something. You're not stupid. You're not stupid by any means. Just listen, think, and and go through it and do it at your speed. So they often feel in a kind of trying to think of the word, a difficult situation when speaking to professionals.
Yeah.
Because they think I'm just a stupid builder. Well, no, you know stuff that guy doesn't know. You know loads of stuff that guy doesn't know. So just if he's a good part of your team, just listen to what he says and question it. Not have a go at him.
Yeah.
Question it until you understand it completely. And I think that's that's the best advice I'd give someone, because
totally agree.
It's really helped me in my life. And I think before I got qualified, I'm a chartered builder. I'm very proud of that. I mean, it was something that I suppose I did to please my father, but I was really wanted to do it for my own right as well. But when I got qualified, I suddenly thought, well, hold on, I know what I'm talking about. I'm qualified. I didn't any more than I did the day before, but it gave me that kind of gravitas to approach people in a different light and actually say, well, hold on, no, let's just go for that again. And I think that's so important when dealing with solicitors and accountants and people like that.
Absolutely. And I think it's about, it's like, as you said, you're part of the team. It's about playing to the strength of different people in the team. I wouldn't have a clue about, some of the construction aspects of building. I wouldn't be able to go and build something. But it might be, for example, yes, I'm a lawyer and I'm there to give legal advice, but it might be that a client says to me, oh, look, we've got to have this meeting with such and such a set of professionals or whoever it might be, objectors to the scheme or whatever. Would I get involved? I'm very happy to get involved. If that's something that, in terms of the strength of the people in the team, if I've got a bit of public speaking ability and negotiating skills and so on, it's about everybody playing to their strengths. And I think it's, you can, if you've got the right lawyer involved, you can make use of that lawyer in other ways. It's not just about drafting a contract, but actually it can be quite useful as a wider part of the team as well.
No, I agree. I'm always agreeing with you, aren't I? It's getting boring. I agree. Yeah, but I do agree. You make a very good point.
Well, I agree with you as well, Robin.
What can I say? Well, next time I stop, Paul, I definitely have to meet up for I don't know, glass of wine or something.
Indeed.
But or just a coffee or whatever. No, that's great. Well, Mark, thank you for joining us. I'm trying to keep these podcasts kind of reasonably short because people are busy. But I think there's some very valuable stuff in there. And if people want to get in contact with Mark and want his help on their projects and stuff, we'll put his information on our website or just contact us.
Appreciate it. And as you said, I'm not going to start the clock running. It's about relationships rather than a quick buck.
Totally agree. I totally, and I'm the same with clients. I mean, I have spent quite a long time with some people who've never paid me a dime, and in fact, they've been on their way out. They've been going bust. They've left it too late to speak to me. Still willing to help them because I've been in that situation myself. So it's
we've all. I think those of us who have had sort of challenges in life, yes, it does give you a very different perspective.
Definitely, it definitely does. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.